Hello everyone. So I'm hanging out on the back deck. It's very nice and peaceful early evening, and I'm doing something that I like to do at the end of every season, which is to reflect on what I've grown in the current season and decide what I will or won't be growing again next year. And because my garden is so small, I do have to be a little bit strict when it comes to what makes it into my garden, because I don't really want to waste any space on something that I don't truly love. So I'm going to go through that list today. I'll start with what I will grow again, what I won't, and then I have some that are maybes and I'm kind of on the edge, and some of the maybe plants I've had for a few years. So you're gonna have to help me decide if I should grow them again next year or not. But let's go ahead and start with the ones that I think most of these, well no, there are some new ones on here, but most of these are like my tried and true. I know that I love them, and then I did, because I grew a lot more plants this year than previous years, fall in love with some new plants. So first off, probably not a surprise, are zinnias. I absolutely love zinnias. They are, I think, probably my number one in the garden. Usually they last throughout the season until they get powdery mildew, but they're cut and come again. They're typically one of the first to bloom in my garden. I start them inside in early April, and then usually I have blooms opening mid-June, and by the end of June it's just full of bright colors. So I absolutely love zinnias. This year I grew the Cinderella varieties. I grew 2 of the Queen Lime series. I might be adding more to that next year. I'll have a seed haul video coming out very soon. And what other ones did I grow? Oh, the giant Baneri. I always grow giant Baneri. So I like to have a combination of the smaller ones and the larger ones. The larger ones help to add height and also fill out bouquets, whereas the smaller ones I think are just really cute and can fit in some of my pots without toppling over. And I also like to have that size variation within the bouquets themselves. So zinnias, definitely growing those again and trying out some new varieties. Although I will say, I don't think I'm doing Cinderella again. I liked them, but I don't think I loved them as much as other varieties. Next is a surprise to me, and this is China asters. So one thing I've learned in my horticulture class is there are so many types of asters. So the ones that I am growing are specifically China asters, and up until this year, I disliked them. Now, the main reason I disliked them was because I didn't actually plan ahead, and I just threw a seed packet in a space that didn't have enough space for them to grow. And so they never performed very well, which was 100% my fault. So before I write off a plant again in the future, I'm gonna make sure I actually give it a fair shot. But until this season, they were just kind of like blah to me. I mean, I appreciated that they bloomed later into the season, but that was really it. And then this year, I specifically bought 3 different types of varieties from Johnny Seed. It was the Lady Lavender Coral, King Apricot, and then the Bonita Shell Pink. I love all of them. So I'm growing all of them again next year and adding some new varieties to my garden. Now, they did eventually get taken out by powdery mildew and scale, so I'm going to keep an eye on that next year. But I don't know if it's these varieties specifically, like if China asters bloom a little bit earlier than other types of asters, but I had blooms on these mid or early July, probably around mid-July, even before my dahlias, but it was a weird year for dahlias. So definitely doing asters, specifically China asters, again in the garden next year, and I cannot wait because I have some new fun varieties also. As I was mentioning, dahlias didn't do that well for me this year, but I am growing them again next year. This is just gonna have to be a staple in my garden. And this was the first year, well, before I learned how to stop killing them about 2 to 3 years ago, this was the first year they didn't really do very well, and it happened for, I think, almost everyone. I don't think I know any single person who said, nope, dahlias did great for me this year, even across the country. So let me know if you had a good dahlia year. But basically, mine just took forever to flower. They started to sprout pretty quickly. Some got stunted, some grew to their full height, but just didn't really set any buds until August. And that is not normal for me. Usually I do have at least buds forming in late June. I have flowers throughout July. But because I love them so much and they're so beautiful, I am going to grow them again next year and probably forever. Dinner plate dahlias are specifically my favorite, although I do have some more decorative dahlias, some of them on purpose, some of them on accident because they were just mislabeled. All of the ones that I overwintered last year, it does seem like they have some sort of disease, so I won't be overwintering those, but I do have some out front that I'm going to overwinter, and I'll grab some new tubers in the spring, but I just can't say no to dahlias. Next up are petunias. I always grow petunias, specifically the super petunias, because again, I always get budworms. So it has to be a petunia I love enough to put it in my garden and fight the budworms for it. Super petunias I love, specifically the Vista series, but I really do love almost all of them. I also fell in love with the wave petunia, the silver variety this year too. And then I noticed that the petunia calibrachoa crossover didn't have budworms. So I think I'm going to try to add some of those to the garden next year and see if it was just a one-off fluke, or if for some reason the budworms aren't attracted as much to those, but we'll see. But petunias are always a must-have in my garden. There's kind of an accent, and I like that I'm starting them from the plant instead of seed. So right when I put them in the garden after our last frost date around mid-May, it's automatic color, which usually I don't have from things I start from seed until sometime, like I said, in mid-June. So that adds color to my garden right away. Next up are tomatoes. I think tomatoes was really the reason I first started gardening in containers. I grew my first tomato plant in a very, very small pot. It toppled over, didn't create any tomatoes, so I learned. But tomatoes to me are the number one vegetable or fruit that tastes completely different than store-bought. So it's worth it to me to grow my own tomatoes so that I can have them in the summer instead of the grocery store ones. So I typically would have had the best luck with are like cherry or grape sized tomatoes, but I also did my first determinate tomato variety, aroma tomato, and that did it spectacularly. What I loved about the determinate variety that I grew this year is I didn't do anything. I didn't do any pruning, anything at all, and it just grew to like the perfect size in my garden, which for me, indeterminate tomatoes are great. They produce throughout the season, and I don't tend to keep up on them as much as I should, and they can kind of start to take over and make my garden a little bit chaotic. But the determinate varieties, which although they bloom in like a shorter, or they ripen in like a shorter time period instead of throughout the season like indeterminate, it was just so easy to maintain. So I think I only really have room for 2, maybe 3 tomatoes a year if I squeeze, but I think I'm going to continue to do at least 1 indeterminate and 1 determinate tomato type. Next up are hydrangeas, and I say that with a lot of caution because I haven't always had the best luck overwintering my hydrangeas and them coming back next year, but assuming that I can move all of the ones that I have here downstairs to the garage, that has always worked for me in the past. What hasn't worked is just leaving them outside. So I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hydrangeas, and I'm hoping they all survive. I don't know where they're all going to fit once they're full size, but they're not full size yet, so I don't have to worry about that. But hydrangeas are one of my favorite flowers, so being able to have them up here 3 stories up just feels really magical to me. So I'm excited to have those and even more of those in the garden next year. Here's a couple new ones to me that I just tried this year and definitely will have next year. My first one was the Superbena, specifically the pink cashmere from Proven Winners. I love it. It grew so vigorously. It still looks pretty right now. I almost think that's kind of on par. Oh, a butterfly. That's almost on par with the Super Petunia Vista Bubblegum that I love so much. So that's going to be another one that I try to make sure I get my hands on every year, that specific variety. But I also want to try some more varieties because if I loved that Superbena so much, I might love even more. Oh, I thought that might have been a hummingbird, but no, it's just a pigeon from far away. Another one that was new to me are caladiums. And I kind of have stayed away from caladiums just because, well, one, I don't have a ton of shade up here or any shade at all. There's like one spot, which is where they happen to be. But also I don't like tropical looking plants in my garden, or at least I thought. So I've kind of always stayed away from them, but I grew some really beautiful varieties. I think my favorite one is the Vava Violet. They're right here behind me. I'll also obviously have videos on the screen of all of these plants, but I love it. And my plan, if it works out, is to overwinter them in the containers they're in. So cut off the leaves and just store all of the bulbs until next year, and hopefully they sprout. But I love them. They filled in so nicely. They've been very low maintenance. They performed really well. They add, again, color to the garden just with the leaves. So I'm very excited to have those. I might also be on the lookout for some other varieties. I think with those, since they do tend to look more tropical, if I get the more pastel colors or the white colors, it doesn't come off as tropical to me, and that's what I love about them. And then I also have kind of my must-have list of herbs that I need to grab every single year. First is chocolate mint. I use that one the most to make tea, so I have to get my hands on at least one of them. Now this year I grew 1 chocolate mint, 1 mint julep, so I think I might just do chocolate like 2 chocolate mint plants next year because I just tend to not use other mint varieties as often, although I do really want to find apple mint. So that is also on my list. If you know where to get apple mint in the Chicagoland area, please let me know. Next on my herb list is basil, just because that is summer to me in an herb. So we love using that fresh throughout the summer. Pineapple sage, again, another one that I use for tea. It's probably my favorite like fruity herb for tea. Another one I like that unfortunately did not do well for me this year is lemon balm. So I am going to try to get more lemon balm next year. Maybe I'll grab 2 because I grabbed 2 pineapple sage. One did much better than the other, but they both still did relatively well. But I only had 1 lemon balm. It did not do well, so I was kind of stuck with it. So I think what I'm going to do with herbs for next year is really focus on the ones that I love, grow 2 of the ones that I love instead of just 1 of each. That way, if one dies, I have a backup. So that is everything on my 100% will grow again next year list. Next, let's go to my won't grow again list. Well, first is blueberries, because I killed 4 of them in the time that I've gardened up here. Well, I don't know if I killed them, but they all ended up getting blight. I'm not going to try a 5th. I'm over it. No blueberries for me. And also, I don't know if they really kind of produced enough before they died to offset the amount that I eat. So I was still going to the store and purchasing blueberries. So I just don't think it's really worth it for me, and I'm probably going to kill it anyway if I try. Next is pumpkins. And even though I was so excited this year to actually have 2 grow in my garden, unless I get sent a free one again, they take up too much space. The plant itself, the vine, even if I grow it vertically, takes up too much space for the little amount that it produces. Now, if I could get like 5+ pumpkins from one vine, maybe, but just 2, it's not worth it for the amount of space that it takes up. Again, when I can just go to the store and buy 2 pumpkins if I need them. Next up is sage. Regular sage, not pineapple sage. It's just not an herb I use enough to warrant having it every year. And we still have dried sage from last year and the year before. So I don't need any more until we run out. So maybe like the year after next, I might have another plant, but I don't need that in my garden next year. Next up is okra. So I think I had one this year. And no, I think I planted 2. One was very stunted. The other ones started to grow, but they had aphids and disease issues the entire time. And we really only use them because my husband likes to make gumbo a few times a year. But it's very hard to time when the okra is ripe with when we're going to make gumbo. So it was kind of one of those things that was like a novelty and fun to try, but we don't use it enough to make it worth, again, taking up the space in my garden. So sorry, but no more okra in my garden. Next up are ground cherries. And this one's tough. Well, not tough to decide not to do it, but I really did enjoy growing it this year. I'd never tried it before. It's a very unique fruit where it's kind of like an umbrella shape, and then the fruit drops on the ground, brown cherry, when it's ripe. And to me, a lot of people say they taste like pineapple. To me, it just kind of tasted like a mix between a grape and a tomato. I didn't love the flavor enough to have it in my garden. So I am unfortunately not going to grow ground cherries again next year, but I do have a ton of seeds. So I'm just going to donate them to a local school because I think that'd be really fun for the kids to come out and kind of pick up the ground cherries and just eat them that way. So that's going to be my plan with the ground cherries. I think they'll be much more useful at the school than they have been for me. But if you do want to try them out, I'd say try it, see if you love the flavor, and if so, go ahead and grow them. Or again, if you have enough space to grow them in your garden, even if you don't 100% love the flavor. Next up are potatoes. So this was my first year growing potatoes. I just wanted to try it and see how it went. It was really easy. I think I put in 5 potatoes and got 25 plus back. Easy to grow in grow bags. I had them in 2 7-gallon grow bags, but we don't eat potatoes enough, and they taste very similar to what's in the store, and the cost of them in the store isn't high enough where it's worth kind of growing them in my garden, if that makes sense. Like, we don't eat them often enough. They're not expensive in the store to buy. So for us, we just grab some potatoes from the grocery store when we need them. So I am not going to use any space for potatoes next year, but the ones I grew this year were purple. So it was still fun, even though it wasn't something that I'm necessarily going to do again. And then last on my definitely won't grow list is corn. And you're probably thinking, Bethany, you didn't grow any corn. And that is correct. I did not grow corn, but I did purchase 2 different varieties of corn seed over the winter when your mind just kind of goes crazy with all the possibilities and you ignore reality in your garden. And then once I realized I was going to need way too much space here to grow the corn, I just vetoed it. It's not going to happen. I do know someone that does grow corn on their rooftop, so I thought it'd be really fun. I also thought it could be a good way to like put up like, I don't know, like some privacy fence or something like that using corn, and then also have it for fall decorations. But it's too much space in my small garden to be worth it, at least for now. Will I change my mind later? Maybe, but I can't really see myself using that amount of space to grow corn in my garden. But I guess we'll kind of see where the future takes me. Now, here is my maybe list. There's not a ton on here, but the first is status. And I think this might be a similar situation to the aster, where I didn't really give it the space to thrive. I kind of jammed it in with other plants. So maybe if I grow status in its own container. I don't think I'm buying any new seeds, but I still have seeds from this past year. And I loved how it dried down. I love dried flowers that look how they do when they're fresh. But they weren't kind of as long of blooming flowers as I like in my garden. But I still think there's a spot for them in my garden, in my heart. So we'll kind of see. That's definitely on my maybe list, but it's not one that I'm kind of as nervous to not grow. Those are coming up. Next is Cosmos, and this is weird because I've loved the Cosmos this year, sort of. I planted 3 of the Cupcake Blush Cosmos in a raised bed that's right over there, and they're all in the same bed. They all get the same treatment, and they all did something completely different. So the first one grew maybe to about a foot tall, bloomed, and then died. And it bloomed super early, like sometime in June. And that's all it did. The middle one, so the second one that was in the bed, grew to like the 3 to 4 foot tall height and bloomed its head off until I pulled it just a week or 2 ago. It started to flop over because I didn't have support. So I will add support next year if I grow these. So that one kind of did what I think it's supposed to do in an ideal situation. And then the third one, which is the only one still remaining, grew to like that same 3 to 4 foot height, got really wide, like it put off a lot of branches, didn't even form buds until late August. Like it just started to put on flowers. So what I am nervous about is, what if I use the space again for 3 Cosmos and they all do what the last one did or what the first one did? So either they all die right away or they all put on a bunch of green growth and no blooms. And again, same treatment in the bed. It's not like one was getting different fertilizer than the other or anything like that. So that's why I'm going back and forth. I think if I do grow these, what I'm going to do is not what I did this year, where I put like all 3 of them in the same bed next to each other, but maybe intermingle them with other plants so that if one doesn't grow, or even if they all 3 didn't grow, it's not like I just have one big block of green. It'll kind of be more dispersed throughout my garden. So I think that's going to be my plan if I do grow them. Now here's the ones that I'm a little bit nervous on. Let me know what you think. First off are my raspberry bushes. So raspberries are my favorite fruit. I love how they taste. There's a little bit of a difference to me off the bush versus at the store, but not a huge difference. Not enough where it's like tomatoes, where I definitely want to grow them myself. It is fun to pick them, but they take up so much space. Like there's a whole part of my front deck. I have 2 raspberry plants right now. There's a whole part that I like barely use, and they're pokey, and if I get too close they stab me. So I'm going back and forth on whether or not I should pull them. So let me know what you think. I don't know what I'm gonna do. At least I still have them now. I might even like overwinter them and wait till spring to make the decision, but I don't know. It's hard, and I really don't know if it's worth it for the space that they take up. And then the other one is my lemon tree. So how many years have I had it? 3 years? I think I've had it for 3 years. Last year it produced 1 lemon. It takes 9 months from when you first see the lemon forming from the flower to it being ripe. So 1 lemon last year. It has 3 on it right now, which again is great. That's more than last year, but it gets scale every year. Like it requires so much maintenance when I bring it inside. I basically hose it down almost every day in the shower just to keep scale off of it. It still ends up getting it, so then I'm going around like scraping scale off for weeks while I'm trying to treat it. This year, usually when I move it outside, the scale goes away. This year the scale did not, so I was continuing to treat the scale. So I just don't know if it's worth it for 3 lemons. in 1 year for all of that work on a plant. And there is a taste difference here from what I'm buying in the store, but again, it's 3 lemons. It's 3 lemons for all that work. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about the lemon tree and the raspberry bushes. At least the raspberry bushes, I just leave them out over winter, so there's no real extra work there. So that's pretty easy, but it's just the space that they take up. So let me know your thoughts. But that is, I think, everything on my list as far as what I'm definitely going to grow and not grow again. And yeah, I always like to do this kind of analysis at the end of the year, take inventory of what I did, what I liked, what I didn't. And each year, my garden just gets a little bit more focused on the things that I love. And I do love that too. I'm also going to I try new stuff every year. Like the potatoes were new this year. So I don't know what I'm going to do new for next year. We'll kind of see how that goes. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below the things that you always grow, or if you grew anything this year that you're like, definitely not going to do that next year. And I will see you in the next video.